it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I've made it my goal to help you create a great life by achieving a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. I'm really excited to continue my 4-part relationship series. And as I've said before, relationships are probably the one area that people have come to me over the years complaining about, wanting better. And I've identified 4 key components that can sabotage any relationship, and when mastered, can create vibrant and exciting relationships. In part 3, I'd like to talk about listening. If there was one complaint that I've heard over the years that people have come to me about their significant other or their business associate, is the lack of listening. Just think how many times you've thought about that or complained about that your relationship would be better if only the other party would listen better. Steve Covey famously said that most people don't listen with the intent to understand, but they listen with the intent to respond. Now think about that. What's going on in our heads when somebody's talking to us? Are we listening, or are we looking for some type of or some type of comment that we can put in there, either to maybe look more intelligent or maybe more of an expert, or perhaps to one-up that person? We're kind of calculating. It's not our fault, really. It's that pesky automatic brain that I always talk about that is always out to protect us. Not necessarily to protect the other person, but to protect us. So oftentimes, automatically, instantaneously, below our level of consciousness, our brain is kind of going through these machinations, if you will, that will help protect us better. So if we're listening to somebody, are we really listening to hear what they have to say to understand them? Or are we listening with the intent to respond, as Stephen Covey famously said? It's important to know that listening is different from hearing, right? We can listen, but are we really hearing what the other person is saying? And there are 3 types of problems when we listen, okay? Just think about this. Are we listening selectively? Are we listening in kind of an ignoring fashion? Or are we pretending to listen? So there's a lot of distinguishing factors here. Because if we're listening selectively, and how many times have you heard it where somebody will joke, oh, my husband has selective hearing. Well, he only hears what he wants to hear, or she only hears what she wants to hear. And that's very common in relationships. Or are we ignoring the other person? I mean, it's so insulting, but we don't realize it sometimes when we zone out, ignoring the other person. And then, of course, pretending to listen, where you're, you're looking interested, right? But you're really not hearing anything. And so those are 3 factors which are probably the most toxic in any type of communicative relationship. You know, the idea of listening without hearing, I've experienced myself, not only when I'm with somebody, but think about when you've been listening, let's say, to a lecture, or you've been watching a movie, or you've been listening, like I do a lot of, to books on tape. Well, I'll be in my car and I'm just going along, driving along, listening to Audible. That's the company that I use. And I'll probably have driven maybe 2 or 3 minutes and realize I didn't hear anything. Nothing. Why? Because I was probably either focused on something on the road, but more probably in my head. I was thinking about circumstances or memories or whatever it is, and I didn't hear anything. So think about when you're communicating with somebody, you're listening. What's happening in that head? Now, yes, as Steve Covey said, as I pointed out, that most people listen not to understand, but with the intent to respond. Well, it's not always the case. Sometimes we're listening, but we have other thoughts or we have other concerns, and we're not really focused. We're not zoned in. That's really important to understand. A lot of times when we're communicating, things and thoughts are going through our heads, and we're worried and we're concerned, and we have all this burden on our shoulders, and we're not really hearing. But why is it important so what? So what we don't hear the other person? Yeah, okay. So maybe the other person won't think it's highly of us. It doesn't matter. But it does matter, because it matters how we are perceived by others, and also how we want others to perceive us. If we want to be perceived as somebody who has a lot of integrity, or who is caring, or is empathetic, then that's why it's very important to listen and to understand what's going on in our head. Are we ignoring the person, just kind of pretending to listen? Or are we practicing selective hearing or selective listening? Are we listening with the intent to respond, so we could either one up or seem more intelligent, or just for the fact of saying stuff? Or are we just lost in our own thoughts? It's important to focus, just so you can be perceived differently and be taken more seriously, and you can perceive the other person and show that respect and that care for the other person. So therefore, they will in turn feel that and respond to you much differently. And I'm going to read directly from my quotes, because honestly, it's hard for me to remember even the quotes that I've said. So I'm going to read it to you. What I've said in the past, and this is why it's so important to be a good listener. Usually when someone is angry, we hear their angry words. Instead, try hearing the unspoken. I am scared. I am frustrated. I am insecure. I am vulnerable. I am threatened. Now, it's important, and this is why it's so important to listen. Because often when you listen, you pick up cues as to what's really going on in somebody's life. Are they hurting? Are they threatened? Do they feel vulnerable? And by really listening, it will help you to connect more on an empathetic level with them. And it's important. Why? Because a lot of times in relationships, you don't really hear the other person because of those other factors I talked about, and therefore you miss a lot of what's going on in their life. And when you miss what's going on in their life, then you really don't understand the person, the totality of that person, and the totality of their life experience. And when you don't understand that, it can cause a discord. It can cause you to be disconnected. If you're in a professional relationship, it may cause you to have hostile feelings toward a coworker or a boss. And certainly in a romantic or intimate relationship, it can form a break. It can really, that disconnect can sabotage a relationship. But when you work on listening and hearing, especially, it can make your relationship so much fuller, and it can make your relationship so much greater, more satisfying, and certainly it will make your spirit much brighter. It'll give you such a connection with another person that can only improve things in your life. In my Patreon video about relationships and the listening in the relationships, I'll go into more depth about how we can really be good listeners. So until next time, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, encouraging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and in soul. Bye for now. Hey, Dr. Charles, CoachMD. Thanks for stopping by. Make sure to like and comment below. I'd love to hear from you. If you think you have a friend who might benefit from this video, share it with them. For access to exclusive content, support my Patreon. There you'll get private access to videos, meditations, health tips, even relationship and financial tips. You'll have a say in what I produce and be able to participate in a monthly call with me. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you soon.